Do you remember? Do you remember? Do you remember the mountaintop star, my beautiful little child? Do you remember the stormy seas, my beautiful little child? Driftwood Man, you are light, you are not alone, we see you.
The Driftwood Man was tired. His limbs were faded and worn. He longed for rest. He longed for a place where he could feel whole again. The Driftwood Man was no ordinary man. He was made of wood, different pieces of wood from different places on the earth. But all of the bits that formed him came from a greater, single entity, the forest of memories. Some parts of him had once touched the centre of the earth, while others had reached for the heavens. His hands had been a great oak that listened to the ancestors speak in a strange Celtic melody. His legs had been part of an olive tree in Sicily that for centuries had borne fruit and nourished many generations of daughters and sons. The eyes in his head had seen savage battles in the forests of Hungary, and his ears had heard the sound of death. His heart was a knot from a rowan tree, which had grown in a clearing in an ancient forest in Britannia. Now the knot stood guard against the sorrow that was buried somewhere hidden in his memory. For his memory was as old as the forests. Most days the Driftwood Man balanced in a place between awake and asleep, for this is where his senses came to life. Colours became vivid, sounds sharper, and his thoughts became clear. His memories took over and dominated his mind. In this place, he could smell and taste the fruits that had once hung ripe and juicy from his limbs. He could hear, once again, the joyous laughter of children who had loved climbing on his gently swaying branches. In this neither here nor there place, he felt connected to everything around him. He was no longer floating in a sea of emptiness. Rather, he was fully aware and the essence of all that was alive in the world pulsed through his wooden body. But on other days the Driftwood Man descended into the darkness of sleep, where he was tortured by the memories of things still etched on his scarred body. He dreamt of the battles that century after century had waged around him. He would try to rouse himself out of these nightmares, but he would only fall further into the darkness. He recalled his branches being chopped from him and formed into weapons with which to do the devil's work. He remembered journeying on the seas, going to strange and beautiful lands, places where the people lived side by side, together with the beasts and the trees and the rivers. But he remembered too the wailing and the terror on the faces of mothers as they watched their children murdered by men with skin paler than their own. Then came an emptiness. He remembered lying at the bottom of the ocean in a murky half-light. His only companions were limpets and barnacles. He still bore the tiny holes and scars that they had left on him. There he felt no hope. He gave himself up to the darkness, accepting that he might never see sunlight again. Then the diver came. The Driftwood Man felt a hand stroking his grainy surface, a tender touch. The feeling that just stirred in him was too much. His rowan heart cracked open with relief, and hope and yearning flooded in. He tried to resist, but he could not keep those feelings at bay. The diver gently pulled him from his watery abyss, and the Driftwood Man felt himself heading up towards the shimmering, beautiful light above. He spent many happy days with the diver. Joy returned to his heart, and his senses, sharpened once more, were aware of the beauty of life. Now he hung by a piece of leather around the young diver's neck. The days of emptiness became distant memories, fading away like mist into the clouds of the past. Once again, the Driftwood Man enjoyed the presence of children. He allowed their laughter and the joy into his knotted heart. There was a different kind of love, too. The diver's true love. This was a love that was new to the Driftwood Man. A deeper one that created a different kind of longing. A longing to feel physically connected to and with something greater than himself. Then came the days that he loved the most, the days when the light of the sun stayed longer than the darkness of the night. Then one day, many people gathered together to light a fire. They gathered to banish their shadows, to share and relieve their pain, to sing and to dance. They gathered to listen to the whispered words of wisdom that rose from the smoke held within the memory of the burning wood. The Driftwood Man listened and watched as the people spoke with the fire. He listened to the tales and the songs. The diver moved closer to the fire. The Driftwood Man could feel its heat in his rowan heart. The diver spoke to the fire. The fire. The Driftwood Man heard the fire crackle and hiss. Then he became aware of words.
Do you remember? Do you remember? Driftwood Man, you we see you.
Do you still dream of the mountain-top stars, the olive groves, my beautiful little child? Do you remember the wind and the rocks and the stormy seas at night? Do you remember the laughter, the smiles, the joy your fruit gave to the workers in their fields? Do you remember the births of generations and the deaths that followed? In a flash of bright light, the Driftwood Man saw all that he had ever been. He saw his roots, his tender leaves. He saw every knot, every scar on his trunk. For the first time since he could remember, he saw himself as a complete being. He saw his own image in the fire. The diver held him in his hand. Then he took the Driftwood Man from around his neck, put him to his lips, touched a gentle kiss on his dry, parched body. Then he cast him into the fire. For the briefest of moments, Driftwood Man was terrified. Then he heard the voice of the fire again. You have travelled so far. You have borne the scars of centuries past. But now your journey is at its end. Do not be afraid, my child. Now you are home. The diver stood back from the fire and watched as the final pieces of the Driftwood Man vanished into the burning embers. As the sun rose early the next morning, all that was left was ash.